The sun was shining bright in Ponyville, shielded by a brilliant blue sky with the puffiest of clouds to decorate it. It was a nice day today, it seemed, with ponies all happy and buzzing about. The birds were chirping, the fowls were playing, friends were chatting, and couples were snuggling under the trees and on the soft, bright green grass. But out of all the couples, there were none as joyed and alive as this one. Rarity, along with the stallion, were both laughing over a silly little punchline.
Oh, you're such a comedian!
Rarity exclaimed through breaths. Once she calmed down, Rarity took a slow, relieving sigh.
Oh, that was hilarious! Can you tell me that joke again?
After the joke was retold, she once again laughed. Never before did she feel so much at ease. All those years of hard work made a strain on the poor mare, but luckily all the stress of that had been relieved. She could do this all day. So, after she calmed down, she said,
Oh, that was hilarious! Can you tell me that joke again?
and the stallion did, and again she laughed. She could do this over and over. But eventually, no matter how hilarious the joke was, and no matter how well he told it every time, she eventually had enough. Looking to the sky, she breathed one more sigh before showing a sign of content.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream!
With that said, she felt a comforting warmth as if some pony was listening.
Make him the cutest I have ever seen!
And then, like a lid being removed and put back on twice, came the sound. By the first two bongs, Rarity felt a warm sensation, like a message. And if she could purr like a cat, she would. Then, by the next two bongs, she opened her eyes and saw a stallion before her. Next, as she fluffled her mane with a face full of lust, she said,
Give him two lips like roses and clover, then tell him his lonesome nights are over.
And just as she demanded, a stallion came before her. With that came lips so attractive and plush, she had to do it. With a joyous leap, she pranced her way to a stallion and gave him the longest, longing, and most passionate kiss. It felt like heaven, kissing a stallion, and she enjoyed every moment of it. She felt so satisfied, so happy, so done, fulfilled, complete. The world around her began to grow darker, and one by one ponies began to leave. It wasn't late. It mustn't, she knew, but yet the world began to grow somber anyway. Her head fell low as she sighed, her mood turning from joyous to depressed. The warm sun became eclipsed. The clouds began to become thin and gray. Her coat went from warm to cold. Her eyes began to feel a little wet and soon followed her muzzle. With a longing sigh, she looked up to the sky and said,
Sandman, I'm so alone.
Looking around, she began to notice the lacking of a stallion, the lacking of something warm, the lacking of company.
Don't have no pony to call my own.
She continued to pout.
Please turn on your magic beam, Mr. Sandman. Bring me a dream.
With her plead sealed, she began to feel a cold gust of wind. With her eyes closed, her mouth lined in a frown, she began to feel a bit drowsy. But she didn't sleep. Instead, she opened her eyes. Her mouth curved in a smile and she began to laugh. The stallion was just telling her a funny joke, and the punchline was simply gold. Once, when she finally calmed down from her laughing fit, she found herself saying,
"Oh, you're such a comedian."
She looked to her side, and before she asked him to tell her the joke again, a thought occurred to her.
Wait a second. Hadn't we already done this?
With a puzzled look, she looked at the park around her. Birds chirping, foals playing, friends chatting, and couples snuggling. But yet there was a little less of that. Curious, she got up and began to explore the park a bit. The first thing she began to notice were the birds. She knew how often birds chirped. They chirped all the time. In fact, when she was a filly, she once wondered if the birds were actually talking to each other, since the way they chirped at each other seemed to sing in the same way two ponies would talk to one another. And years later, she learned for sure that they do, for she had seen a pony talk to them before. The name escaped her, but she'll only remember eventually. At least, if she remembered what she was even thinking about. By the sound of another chirp, she remembered the birds. Their chirping that always sang in melody, in duets, in harmony, not in repeats, over and over. Her mind turned to the foals that were playing. She never really liked foals. They're chaotic, disorderly, and never acted in a pattern. They were unpredictable, unamusing, uncouth. Even in her days as a foal, she could remember not playing with the other foals much. Instead, she simply gossiped among her peers. Something about a colt she simply could not recall, because she could not even recall what she was talking about. Then she saw the foals and remembered. They were a bit too orderly. They were all rather running around in the same circle, repeatedly passing a ball back to each other, or were playing patty cake. But what all these actions each pair of foals chose to do had in common was that they were all done in perfect sync. But before her mind moved any further, her mind turned to the friends who were chatting. She remembered friends. They were always great to have around. They gave you a chance to express yourself, to enjoy something with them, and to learn something new. But these friends weren't being expressive, nor were there anything to learn from their chatter. There were words, but they seemed just as pointless as the chirping. She then tried to recall what chirps had to do with the matter, but it sadly slipped her mind. Friends always came in their shapes and sizes. Some were friends you only see at a specific place and time, like a classmate or co-worker, that you would still wave to if you were to see them anywhere else. Some were casual friends that you associate with because you enjoy the same thing together. Some were best friends, ones that will always have your back, never judge, and had the worst times with, only for the next to become the best. She probably had about 2, 3, 4, 5? She could not recall because she could not even recall what she was thinking about. Her mind then turned to the couples who were snuggling in the bright green grass, which now seemed a shade darker. She remembered couples. You'd see them all the time. Sometimes you'll gawk at how adorable they are, can't help but smile as they nuzzle each other. Sometimes you feel uncomfortable, for you knew that if you associate with either one of the two, then they'll stare you down, for a couple must not care about any pony else but themselves. Sometimes you can't help but roll their eyes because they were rather plastic perfect or far too young. and it made you thought that it was only a short matter of time before they'll depart. But none of these couples were adorable, uncomfortable to be around, or fake. They weren't even snuggling, just wrapping each other in the other's hooves. She then could not recall what she was thinking about, and with her mind blank, she decided to fill it with another thought. A stallion. She left a stallion behind, feeling embarrassed and ashamed. She cantered her way back to her spot to find a stallion.
I'm sorry I wandered off. I shouldn't have. Will you forgive me? Will you judge me? Please don't think I'm just some fool with a low attention span. Please don't assume that I'll just forget you. I never will.
The stallion wasn't listening, it seemed. She needed a way to get through to a stallion. She bit her lip and began to feel afraid that a stallion might never forgive her and think that she would indeed forget about a stallion. Looking to the sky, she breathed a sigh before showing a sign of concern.
Mr. Sandman, read me a dream.
With that said, she felt warmth, as if someone was turning to her.
Make him the cutest I've ever seen.
And then, like a bell being tolled 4 times, came the sound. By the first 2 bongs, Rarity felt a sensation, like someone was simply touching her by the shoulders. If she could figure out why, she would. By the next 2 bongs, she opened her eyes and saw a stallion before her, which she could tell was judging her no more. Next, as she crossed her hoop, a face filled with relief, she said,
Give him the word that I'm not a rover, and then tell him that his lonesome nights are over.
She felt at first relieved that a stallion forgot her actions, could forget her foolishness, could forget anything she did wrong. But yet she still felt sorry, regretting that she'll even think about solving the issue by simply washing it away. What happened to her ability to face consequences? What happened to her ability to think straight? What happened to her ability to remember? Her train of thought was soon lost, but her emotions weren't. Her mind empty, yet her heart so broken. She broke into tears. A stallion wrapped a stallion's hoop around her the moment she threw herself into a stallion's chest to be comforted from the feeling of dread without context. And soon everything became darker. A stallion left along with every pony else, so Rarity was left to simply cry to herself. With a plea, she cried,
Mr. Sandsman! I'm so alone! Don't have no pony to call my own! Please turn on your feet, Mr. Sandsman! Read me a dream!
She burst into a complete fit of tears, unable to think or do anything but curl and emotionally suffer. But then she felt a surprisingly comforting cold wind, so she kept her tearful eyes shut and her lips quivering. She began to feel a bit drowsy, but she did not sleep. Instead, she opened her eyes, her mouth steadied into a smile, and began to inexplicably laugh. She stopped and immediately wondered why. When her memories and thoughts gathered, she remembered that a stallion was telling her a joke. Again, and again, and again.
No!
She yelled as her memories began to fade, fighting to keep them afloat.
There is something going on! I know it! I know it! Oh, you're such a comedian! Wait, no, you're not! What the hell is going on?
Rarity then thought that a stallion seemed to not really like where this was going. Although she could not be sure, a stallion did seem emotionless. But yet she felt that a stallion was getting suspicious of her, as if a stallion was hiding something.
Who are you? What is your name? What am I doing here?
She could see a stallion slowly shaking a stallion's head, making her shake.
You're scaring me. You. And I don't like it. This isn't real. None of this is real. And you are not even a stallion.
Suddenly all the birds stopped chirping. All the fools stopped playing. All the friends stopped chatting, and all the couples stopped snuggling. Only for the briefest of moments, as the stallion's eye began to twitch. Rarity came to one conclusion from this.
I got to get out of here.
With a dash, she began to canter as far as she could, as far away from the stallion as she could get. The world around her became entirely black and white, like a movie out of the theater. She could hear a constant crunch of leaves, sticks, all as if she was in the woods, even though she could have sworn she was in the park in the middle of winter. But force or no, she tripped on something she assumed might be a branch or a bench. She could not tell, but it was something she tripped on for sure. When she did, she panted, gathering breath, trying to ingrain her thoughts, her memories. When she had calmed down enough, she rolled onto her back. The first thing she saw were the birds, all chirping rapidly and angrily at her. She screamed at the sight of the vultures around her. She got up almost as quickly as she could and ran once again, hornets flying everywhere from the sudden movement. The bats began to screech in rather shock or anger, but before she could figure out which it was, or what the flying things even were, she crashed into a stone wall. She realized that she was now in a cave, even though she was in a forest or a park. Before she could figure out what, she tripped yet again, only over a foal. She gasped, and instantly all the fools stopped playing and turned their attention towards her. There was no anger, no joy, no sadness, no fear, no peace. Just plainly staring at her. But no matter rather or not, they had an expression. She knew she disturbed them.
Pardon me?
The fools didn't say anything. All they did was walk towards her. Feeling off ease by this, Rarity began to backpedal away from them, which only made them walk a little faster. It soon became to realization that the faster she moved, the faster they did. A walk turned into a trot turned into a run, and once Rarity lost her patience, she dashed off. The trot turned into a canter. A beach ball came her way, and when it landed on her, she launched from a devastating blow from what seemed like such a light ball. She slid on the metal floor, and when she caught her breath, she saw a stallion behind the metal, holding it to close it.
Wait! No!
Rarity cried, but it was too late. The door was shut, sealed, and locked. She didn't recall being in a metal cellar. She thought she was at the park. Or was it a cave? She didn't even know anymore. She jumped when she felt a cold touch of a hoof on her side, and when she looked to see who it was, she screamed to discover it was one of the bulls. She banged at the rock wall, or probably at a tree at the park, and screamed to let her out. But when she finally ran out of energy, she was finally calm enough to see that the bull wasn't going to advance on her. If anything, the fool wasn't going anywhere at all, just sitting there and pounding her hooves in the air as if she was playing patty cake. She calmed down when she realized that actually there were two playing patty cake together in the park, near the tree she was bashing at. At least she was sure of it. She then listened in on a conversation from one of the friends. The conversation was making no sense. Every word they spoke was meaningless, yet they were speaking in perfect equestrian. As she listened in, the words began to sound a little mixed together, as if they were talking over each other. And as she tried to listen in further and further to get a grasp of what they were talking about, there came more voices, more words, more nonsense. She looked away when she had enough, but yet it did not stop. The voices started to mix and crumble into each other like the sound of a blender. Yet so much of it began to make sense. She couldn't tell what the sense was, but she began to understand every conversation around her. But as soon as the mixed jumbo began to become bearable, they all formed into sync with one another and began to all talk in the same equestrian words. Even though one can understand every pony saying the same thing at once more than they can understand several things being said at once, Rarity began to find this irritating, like water torture. She screamed as the voices began to roar louder, the words slowly reducing to a single sentence, then a single statement, then a single word. A great amount of pain came to her forehead. Looking around, she found herself in the metal chamber and noticed a large dent in the rock wall and the dripping of blood down her muzzle. But yet she could have sworn it was mud when she noticed that she actually tripped over something and fell into it. She tripped over a couple. She looked behind the metal walls and saw several couples snuggling about. When she moved about carefully in the cave, she thought about why she was in the metal park. Perhaps maybe she did something. Perhaps she ate something, or perhaps she panicked the moment she realized was walking and accidentally stepped on a couple. Before she could run, they wrapped their hooves around hers, pulling her in between them. She struggled, desperate to get away, but to no avail. Forced to accept her fate, she was pulled in between the couple. Both snuggled around her. She could feel their warmth, their heat, and that they were melting into her. Their flesh began to be one with hers, morphing into an ugly goop of whites, purple, gray, and a hint of light blue. She wished she could scream. She really did, but her muzzle was melted into one of the couple's chest, and soon the world stretched as her eyes began to join shut. She finally felt something solid, a hoof reaching to grab her away from the pony goop. She seemed like a mess, to say the least. If you had the imagination to imagine how a pony would look if they were pulled away from melting, then you might be just as mad as I, for imagination can be just as dangerous as it is fun. Power that no one could see, feel, or hear. Power that can uplift, power that can heal, power that can corrupt and twist. Rarity gazed at her savior.
Oh, it's you! You saved me!
She praised the stallion. The stallion only dragged her back to their spot, right where she was supposed to be. When they reached, Rarity could only gaze into a stallion's eyes. She could not make out any facial details. No coat color, no mane, not even the color of a stallion's eyes. But yet she loved a stallion. A stallion had beauty that she could not discriminate, but somehow she still loved a stallion anyway.
Thank you.
She leaned close to a stallion, and a stallion did not move, did not respond, only just stood there like a statue as she kissed his cold lips. Her eyes closed and her mind emptied. And when she opened them, she didn't see anything. There was no difference between closing them or opening them. She was only in the abyss. There were no birds chirping, no foals playing, no friends chatting, no couples snuggling, and no stallion. But yet a stallion was there. She knew a stallion was. Just knew it. With her eyes closed, filled with fear, she said,
Mr. Sandman?
Her heart skipped a beat. That was the first voice since... It was the first, but desperate to get out of the dark as soon as possible, she continued.
Reno's a dream!
Like a dragon with drums instead of feet stepping 4 times came a sound. By the first 2 bumps, Rarity felt a burning sensation, like someone had grabbed her. And if she could escape, she would. Then, by the next 2 bumps, she opened her eyes and saw a stallion before her. Next, with her expression filled with traumatization, she said,
"Give him a pair of eyes with a come hither gleam. Give him a lonely heart like Pugliese, and lots of wavy hair like Liberence."
Just as the man-eater stallion came before her, with welcoming eyes ever so seductive, but yet with a touch of twisted anger, with a wavy mane that almost seemed a bit too wavy like a princess. Before she could begin to question why she didn't fully get what she wanted, a stallion began to approach. The stallion's eyes turned from seduction to anger. Before she could react, she felt a stab in her heart. When a stallion withdrew his knife, his neck covered by a clown's ruff, Rarity fell to her hooves. Anger frozen on the stallion's face like a painting. The stallion left Rarity where she was and disappeared.
"Mr. Sandman, someone to hold."
She struggled to continue through her panting as she strived to keep herself breathing.
"Don't be so preachy before we're old. So please, turn on your magic beam, Mr. Sandman. Read us!"
She panted harder, multitasked between pleading, breathing, and ensuring herself that a stallion was still there.
"Please, please, please, Mr. Sandman, read us a dream."
Her lungs gave out, her heart stopped. Her eyes closed, her mouth cold and lifeless. The last thing she could feel was a cold wind. And then her eyes opened, and she began to laugh.